I Am Trick presents to you a very interesting movie for you today about brainwashing. The movies make us think of brainwashing as something really extravagant that takes equipment, drugs, extreme torture, etc. But even persuasive conversation can be a type of brainwashing. It isn't just what we see in the movies, this extreme type of prison brainwashing. We're going to talk about all different types of brainwashing from the Manchurian Candidate and all these different ideas and help to define it and also show you how medical doctors are being brainwashed as they go through medical school, brainwashed to avoid natural medicine.
Soon after joining the war, the United States began to notice that something very strange was happening. Upon being released from prisoner of war camps, many American troops, instead of telling horrific tales of their time spent with the communists, preached the virtues of communism and the superiority of the communist way of life. Dumbfounded as to how the Chinese were able to transform these previously patriotic Americans into communists, the US government called on CIA operative Edward Hunter to investigate the phenomenon. Hunter coined the word brainwashing to describe what the Chinese were doing to the captured American troops. In his book Brainwashing, Hunter painted a harrowing picture, explaining that the Chinese were using brainwashing in order to create a slave race. The intent is to change a mind radically so that its owner becomes a living puppet, a human robot, without the atrocity being visible from the outside. The aim is to create a mechanism in flesh and blood, with new beliefs and new thought processes inserted into a captive body. What that amounts to is the search for a slave race that, unlike the slaves of olden times, can be trusted never to revolt, always to be amenable to orders, like an insect to its instincts. The Oxford English Dictionary defines brainwashing as the systematic and often forcible elimination from a person's mind of more established ideas so that another set of ideas may take their place. According to this definition, brainwashing can be described as the purposeful attempt to change an individual's ideas and beliefs. However, since everyone is bombarded on a daily basis with attempts to change their beliefs, brainwashing must be identified as a radical or extreme attempt to change an individual's beliefs and ideas.
Let's look into a little bit what happens in a medical school, in a classroom.
Do no harm. What is implicit in this simple precept of medicine? An awesome power. The power to do harm.
First, don't hurt. Yes, what an interesting idea. The basic idea of medicine from Hippocrates. If you want to help people, well, first, don't hurt people. This is a very important point, and yet modern medicine has turned their back on that. Let's watch a little more.
First, do no harm. What is implicit in this simple precept of medicine? An awesome power. The power to do harm. Who gives you this power? The patient.
Doctors are brainwashed to understand that they can hurt and they should hurt. They have to do biopsies and they have to do other things that are destructive tests.
Sad fact is, human beings are not worthy of trust. It is human nature to lie, take shortcuts, lose your nerve, get tired, make mistakes. No rational patient would put his trust in a human being, and we're not going to let him.
They have to be brainwashed to do allopathy and to do diagnosis, not to do natural type of therapy, not to do holistic therapy, but to focus on symptoms rather than causes.
It is our mission here to rigorously and ruthlessly train the humanity out of you and make you into something better. We're going to make doctors out of you.
Yes, they try to take the humanity, the compassion, the caring, and the sharing, the touch out of medicine. To be a medical doctor, you need brainwashing, to give up the ideas of humility and compassion and become arrogant and big-headed. We're taught in 5th grade that we are made of atoms with electrons and protons that don't touch each other. Nothing touches anything else. We are electrical particles held together with energetic forces. But MDs must be learned and brainwashed to never discuss electric or energetic medicine. They might lose their license. We must ignore natural medicine so that they become ignorant by ignoring. One of the most prolific diseases of all is malnutrition, and its cure is good food. So, of course, it's obvious that food is medicine. But doctors must be blind to food as your best medicine and concentrate on what drug to prescribe. You need to give up the ideas of natural balance and seek synthetic patented medication. Synthetic. A patent is only given to a person when they prove that their substance is not of nature. So a patent chemical is not natural. Synthetic patented medicines are truly not tested for side effects. They are tested for efficacy, but side effects are observed, not really tested. Most side effects become more observable when the synthetic medicine enters the market. So synthetic medicines are often removed after hurting people for 20 years and then their patent wears out, sometimes even before. To use a synthetic anything is an insult to the body. To be a medical doctor, you must be blinded to this. You must have a new idea that synthetic medicines are fine to put into the body for any type of first sign of concern. Symptoms are no longer a signpost to inner disease. Symptoms become the enemy. What's wrong with you? Don't worry, we have a pill for that, is the new brainwashed theme of existence. An MD must learn not to seek natural balance, but learn to inhibit biology with synthetic patent medication. For depression, inhibit biology with an MAO inhibitor. For heart disease, use a calcium blocker rather than potassium-rich foods. For pain, use a painkiller rather than seek the cause of pain. For stomach, the stomach needs acid to work, so we must learn to use antacids. Thereby, we block digestion. If you have a cough and can't get something out, they use a cough suppressant so that something stays in. For fever, they use an antipyretic. You see, nature is stupid, doctors are smart, is what they're taught in medical school. If you are toxic and sweat too much, Botox can block the sweating. If you have diarrhea to detox and try to get something out, Imodium can stop the detox. Or maybe we can sew your ass up to stop the detox. Whenever a patient is detoxifying through any orifice, the MD has a synthetic patent to stop any detox. The mentally ill get a pill rather than compassion. For cancer, they use poisonous chemotherapy. They learn to wake you up to give you a sleeping pill. They get you off the toilet to give you a laxative. They make up new diseases to sell new pills. And children are medicated at the first sign of any tiny, minuscule, itsy-bitsy concern. Don't worry about the side effect from these pills. We have other synthetic pills for all those side effects. An MD must lose his humanity and become a robot working to dispense pills. These synthetic pills make for dependency, toxicity, addiction, complication, and a wide variety of harm. But what the hell? It's all in the zany life of an MD. You must take your meds becomes your new mantra if you want to be a medical doctor. And Big Pharma, when they say shit, the MD's got to learn to go in the corner and squat. When properly brainwashed, the MD is an arrogant, inhuman, ignorant, symptom fighter, and pill pusher. Ready to make Big Pharma money. Lots of money. Now you understand more about brainwashing for MDs.
Biopsies, drugs, side effects, radiations, surgeries, exploratory surgeries, destructive tests, on and on and on. You see, medicine has gotten away from the idea of first don't hurt. And instead of exploring lifestyle and diet and exercise and meditation and stress reduction, and instead of exploring simple compassion, medicine has turned its back on these things. We need to get back to this, and Patch Adams helps to teach us.
To become a medical doctor, you'll have to be brainwashed against natural medicine and see synthetic drugs as the only alternative. You have to be brainwashed to accept allopathy and thereby learn about which drug or which surgery and how to focus in on diagnosis and not really how to focus in on the body whole and the holistic problems. You have to learn to reject nature and worry only about what synthetic drug. And if you try to reject those synthetic drugs, you'll lose your license. Or like me, lose your passport. Sleep deprivation, bad food, bad diet, fear, intimidation, too much work, pushing people at every end, all used by medical schools to help brainwash.
In a cycle of abuse that began on day one of med school, when her insulting doctor was still an idealistic student. How could she know that abused medical students become abused doctors who may one day abuse patients?
We all go down this path, and it is grueling and oftentimes incomprehensible. Only those who have lived it can really understand it. You know, we can explain to our loved ones, we can make videos or write posts and try to explain to the general public what it means. Why is this so tough? Why do we often complain about it so much? But it's hard to really grasp it and truly understand it until you're in it, until you put that white coat on.
I'm sorry, Vincent. Date of death, August 25th, 1998. Cause of death, asphyxiation by hanging due to bullying, hazing, and sleep deprivation as an intern at a New York hospital.
Residency, med school. It's toxic, it's not healthy, it's not sustainable. It's ironic, we're promoting health and yet not taking care of ourselves.
There is a strong, premeditated, purposeful, intentional brainwashing going on.
Sleep deprivation is a torture technique. Fear as a teaching tool just teaches us to be afraid. I can help doctors, though there's one group I can't help: patients.
We're told that we can talk to our seniors, our attendings, our program directors, the GME office. That's not true. The best residents aren't those that make waves or stir things up. They just maintain the status quo.
I definitely graduated med school with PTSD. It has changed me forever. I will never be the same again. We had 2 suicides and 1 murder, skull crushed with a bat, and another serving life in prison for murdering a classmate after delusional episode after not sleeping for a month.
The suicide rates for doctors, dentists, and all these other people, all there using the drugs and etc., is very, very high.
Please change medical education. We were so beaten down. It takes a lot for me to cry, but I cried all the time, along with everyone else. But we hid it from each other, of course.
Yes, the med school student is beaten down, beaten to the point of submission, beaten to brainwashing.
Robert J. Lifton is an American psychologist who was among the first in the scientific community to study brainwashing. According to his 1961 book, there are 10 steps involved in the process. Number 1. Assault on identity. Make them question who they are.
Questioning who they are so hard that it leads to suicide.
3 residents have passed away in the last 7 months at Loma Linda University Medical Center.
Due to untreated depression in medical school. Each year, more than 1 million Americans lose their doctors to suicide. Across the country, our doctors are jumping from hospital rooftops.
Yes, it's absurd and it's crazy what's happening, the amount of suicide. It's dramatic in this profession. Oh my God, what's happening?
Our doctors are jumping from hospital rooftops, overdosing in call rooms, found hanging in hospital chapels. It's medicine's dirty secret, and it's covered up by our hospitals, clinics, and medical schools.
Number 2. Guilt. Make them feel inherently wrong.
I was happy, secure, and mostly unafraid until med school. I recall in vivid detail the first orientation day. Our anatomy professor stood before an auditorium.
So we all know that residency training is brutal, that it's not healthy. And yet we're told that this is just the way it is. That in the long run, this is going to make you a stronger and better physician.
What it does is makes you a stronger and better puppet of the drug companies. That's what it really does.
And said these words: if you decide to commit suicide, do it right so you do not become a burden to society. He then described in anatomical detail how to commit suicide.
These deaths have been shrouded in secrecy, and that's just standard for the medical profession. We generally get an email saying that we're very sorry to have lost someone, and then we don't really get much clarity. There's just a lot of these rumors floating around, and the overall outcome is just the same. We're silence. We don't give this issue the attention it deserves.
Number 3, self-betrayal. Make them feel that they've let themselves down.
Greg died just a few hours after being told not to follow his psychiatrist's safety plan. By who? By an agency with no physician oversight that controlled his medical license.
I don't think I'm funny, or I don't think I am funny. Punctuation matters, and it's part of this brainwashing process that we use to try to get these people to obey.
You know, we all talk about how medical training is so broken.
I'm a perpetual optimist. Yet after a decade of 7-minute visits at assembly line clinics, even I felt suicidal. This profession demands too much from us. I've thought of suicide 1,000 times. The misery is too much for me.
Number 4, breaking point. A mental breakdown brought on by the effects of steps 1 through 3.
Doctors describe med school as a soul-crushing boot camp, a dehumanizing nightmare, my own personal Vietnam. Medical training is neither motherly nor kind.
Number 5, leniency. The brainwasher shows the newly broken victim compassion.
The older physicians, the older surgeons will say how things were so terrible back in the day, and they didn't have the 80-hour work week restriction. We were working way harder. Things were way worse. You guys should be happy. You guys should be thankful that things are the way they are now.
Our medical schools, clinics, hospitals, and related agencies actually cause mental health conditions in doctors. Then they blame us and force us to release our confidential medical records. And in the end, they take our license.
Take your license, embarrassment, character assassination, take away your passport, everything that they can do to brainwash.
Number 6, compulsion to confess. Reaffirm guilt from this new perspective of kinship.
All these things, and we complain, but we don't really do anything about it. I was even trying to do a documentary, and I copped out. I didn't even start that.
Or to end the abuse. It's not costly or complicated to stop bullying, hazing, and abuse. It's been outlawed from elementary schools to fraternities. Why not healthcare?
Number 7, channeling of guilt. Demonize the victim's old life as the source of their guilt.
And all the while, they sacrifice their entire life to this profession, their family, their friends, their relationships, their support, everything that makes them human, just so that they can try to save someone else's life. How can we take care of someone else if we can't even take care of ourselves?
Number 8, releasing of guilt. By making their old life the source of guilt, they willingly choose to abandon those views and liberate themselves.
Fact. We enter medicine with our mental health on par with or better than our peers. Suicide is an occupational hazard of our profession.
Number 9, progress and harmony. Present them with a new ideology to latch onto.
The culture is such that it is so difficult to be vocal about anything in the medical profession, especially something like this. We're afraid of what the repercussions may be. How would this affect our chances to get into medical school or residency or fellowship? We can't even think about what's proper, what's right for the common good, because we're so caught up in the system, and this makes us feel alone. And then this loneliness turns into resentment, into spite, into anger, and then we just turn against the people that we're working with. We don't treat them the way we would want to be treated, and we perpetuate the cycle just continues. We just feed into it. We become the exact thing that we didn't want to be in the first place.
And number 10, final confession and rebirth. The victim confirms their new identity by shedding any remaining guilt associated with their old values and emerges reformed.
We make his brain perfect before we blow it out.
Obviously, it's not enough. People are dying. At our schools, at our programs, physicians are dying. If you are in the medical profession right now, I would bet that you probably know someone, either in med school or residency, that is now gone. And the sad thing is that when we do lose them, we don't properly mourn them, we don't honor them, we hide them. We erase them from the hospital. We blame the program. Oh, the program must have caused that. Not in my program. My program is better than that. And secretly we tell ourselves that they were just weaker and we're stronger. We wouldn't do that. And all the while, we stay quiet. Remember, silence is a choice. Silence is an action.
Medical culture and education must change. Yet cultures and institutions don't change because we ask them to change, even when it's in their self-interest. They change when they're forced to change.
But the evil medical cartel, Big Pharma, and all these other things, profit over people. Profit becomes more important to people. They have to brainwash these people in order to keep that up. That's going to be very difficult to change.
Number one, doctors are the most brainwashed people on the planet. Doctors have been through 10 years of intense drug training. And so they're, especially in the cancer industry, and I'm not saying that all doctors are bad. I'm not saying doctors are bad at all. I'm just saying in the cancer area, they've been taught bad protocols. Now, as far as trauma, as far as, you look at little babies that are born premature and now we can save them. We've made so many advances in medicine that it's amazing. So I'm not down on the whole medical institution. I'm not down on modern medicine at all. I'm just talking specifically on cancer. I mean, if somebody came in the door and shot me with a shotgun, I'm going to go to the emergency room. I'm not going to go take an herb, okay? So trauma medicine, we're light years ahead of where we were 50 years ago. There's a lot of areas of medicine where we've taken big strides. Cancer, we haven't, and it's because the protocols that are taught concerning cancer are drug intensive, and we've already gone over as to why they're drug intensive. But the doctors have been taught that. So doctors that are cancer specialists have been taught drug intensive treatment. They just don't know any better. Now, you'd think that once they get out of school and they start treating patients with these protocols that really don't work, that something would go on, so a light would turn on. And it does with a lot of doctors. And I know many doctors that used to be conventional and now they're natural. Some of them get caught up in the almighty dollar. And they know that what they're doing is not healing, but they still do it. There was a survey that was done at the McGill Cancer Clinic in Montreal back in the early 90s, and they interviewed 64 oncologists, and they asked them, if you were diagnosed with cancer or if your loved ones were diagnosed with cancer, would you do chemotherapy to treat it? And 58 said they wouldn't. 91% of 64 oncologists said no. They know. But they still continue to do it. Why? They may have a big mortgage on their house. Their wife may enjoy their lavish lifestyle. They need that money to keep coming in. And if you come out against it, you're going to be ostracized and blackballed, and you're going to be looking for a job the next day. Because believe me, it's happened before and it'll happen again. They will not allow you to question the protocols. And they will not allow you to treat cancer with natural medicine. So why do doctors agree to it? Why do they continue doing it? Some of them are ignorant. Some of them are hooked on the money. And the ones that have the integrity, that when they learn about it, they get out of it. And I know many doctors that have done that. And believe me, the money ain't quite as good in herbals as it is if you're a conventional oncologist.
I don't have the solution. I don't know what all the answers are, how to fix it, but I do know that the way to start is by having a conversation, by having a discussion, getting it out there, speaking about it.
Awareness to care and to dare to share this video, very important.
Are there safer therapies that you have maybe seen, or are those kind of drugs that you sold and are talking about largely unneeded?
There are crisis situations where I believe that someone may need one of these psychiatric drugs. Like I said before, I'm not anti-drug. However, when you're talking about chronic use of any psychiatric drug, you are heading down a road of problematic, side effects. There's just no way around it. And addiction If you take a benzodiazepine or an anxiolytic, which are the anti-anxiety drugs like Klonopin, Xanax, Valium, there's a large number of benzos now that are out there. If you take those drugs for 2 weeks, you will be dependent. If you take them longer, you will be an addict. There are no exceptions to that. And people do not understand that when they give you these drugs and prescribe them to you, they'll tell you you're going to be on these drugs for the rest of your life. And the reason they tell you that is because nobody knows how to get you off of them safely and comfortably. Because when you try to get off of them, most everyone has symptoms that mimic the exact same symptoms they were given the drugs for, but they're more severe. So what you're told is, oh, well, you know, what we thought, for example, if you have an adverse reaction to antidepressants and you become manic psychotic, well, you know, what we thought that you had was a depressive disorder, but now we realize that this is part of a bipolar depressive spectrum because you've had this, you know, event, and therefore we're going to add another drug to your regimen, and you're going to be on these drugs for the rest of your life. And people accept that, and they walk away feeling that they're defective, that there's something wrong with them. And the fact of the matter is, many times, it's their poor dietary habits, it's their lifestyles, it's their psychological issues from childhood or from their marriage, or it's a number of other things, and they haven't even investigated what the real root cause of the problem is. And so what they do is start masking the symptoms with drugs, and then you get more symptoms, more drugs, and pretty soon you are what they tell you you were. Did you get that? They create the disease to treat. And it's not just in the psychiatric field, but it's the easiest place to do it because there are no tests required to diagnose a person with a psychiatric illness. There's no blood test. There's no urine test. There's no PET scan. You may have a little questionnaire that you can fill out that is very subjective. You have a third party that's observing you for maladaptive behaviors, but they don't have any disease evidence. And that's what makes it so lucrative, because you're a potential customer, I'm a potential customer. Anyone that has a death in the family, has a divorce, has a bad day, has a bad job, whatever, they are a candidate for drugs.
Let's understand a little bit more about brainwashing and the conditioning that happens to the medical doctors.
As Kathleen Taylor pointed out in her book, Brainwashing, The Science of Thought Control, the extremity of brainwashing can be elucidated by identifying two distinct characteristics unique to the victim of brainwashing. Firstly, one who is brainwashed adopts new beliefs and ideas that are drastically different from, and often completely antithetical to, their previous beliefs. Secondly, the brainwashed victim doesn't adopt these new beliefs gradually over a period of months or years, but instead in a very short time span, and a lot of the time even instantaneously. The 20th century British psychiatrist William Sargent noted that when contemplating the phenomenon of brainwashing, he came upon a stunning idea. Sargent hypothesized that the victim brainwashed for political purposes is no different in kind from the therapy patient whose beliefs are radically changed by a therapist, or from the religious convert who is suddenly shown the light by a priest. All three individuals undergo a sudden conversion, and thus, Sargent reasoned, all three cases must be capable of being rendered intelligible by the same underlying physiological and psychological processes. Assuming the truth of Sargent's hypothesis, the quest to understand how an individual can be brainwashed for political purposes becomes a much broader and more important quest. It becomes the quest to understand how ordinary individuals can be convinced by therapists, priests, politicians, or whomever else to radically and instantaneously transform not only their deepest beliefs and ingrained attitudes, but their very identity and way of life. In dwelling on this question, Sargent found the work of the 20th century Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov especially enlightening. Pavlov won the Nobel Prize in 1904 for his research on the physiology of digestion, but later in his life he turned his attention to study the nervous system of animals. Such research in fact directly influenced the brainwashing techniques utilized by the Russians and Chinese in the 20th century. In the experiment which interested Sargent, Pavlov imposed extreme physical and emotional stresses on a number of dogs. Pavlov observed that eventually, when enough stress had been imposed on a dog, it would collapse in a state of hysteria. Unable to handle the overwhelming stress, the dog's brain would become inhibited and would in a sense shut down, rendering the dog temporarily incapacitated. Interestingly, Pavlov noted that if the breakdown was severe enough, any behavior which he had previously conditioned into the dog disappeared. Moreover, if he attempted to condition a new behavior in the dog shortly after the breakdown occurred, he observed that the newly conditioned behavior became deeply embedded in the dog's nervous system and was subsequently very difficult to remove. Upon reading of Pavlov's experiment, Sargent immediately grasped its significance with respect to the question which plagued his mind. The possible relevance of these experiments to sudden religious and political conversion should be obvious even to the most skeptical. Pavlov has shown by repeated and repeatable experiment just how a dog, like a man, can be conditioned to hate what it previously loved, and love what it previously hated. Similarly, one set of behavior patterns in man can be temporarily replaced by another that altogether contradicts it, not by persuasive indoctrination alone, but also by imposing intolerable strains on a normally functioning brain. In inducing a sudden conversion, be it for political or religious purposes, the key is, as Sargent noted, to impose intolerable strains on a normally functioning brain. Such intolerable strains are effectively produced by stimulating intense emotions within an individual, until the brain becomes overloaded and breaks down in a state of hysteria. As Pavlov's experiment showed, once such a breakdown has occurred, the individual will be left in a state of high suggestibility, ready to release all previous beliefs and emotional identifications. In other words, such a person will be primed to accept new ideas, beliefs, and even a new way of life. William James, the 20th century philosopher, also identified intense emotional experiences as effective at inducing sudden conversions. Emotional occasions, especially violent ones, are extremely potent in precipitating mental rearrangements. The sudden and explosive ways in which love, jealousy, guilt, fear, remorse, or anger can seize upon one are known to everybody. Hope, happiness, security, resolve, emotions characteristic of conversion, can be equally explosive, and emotions that come in this explosive way seldom leave things as they found them. Nearly 200 years before Pavlov conducted his experiments, which would display to modern brainwashers the importance of stimulating intense emotions in their victim, John Wesley, an Anglican cleric and founder of the Methodist movement, intuitively grasped the importance of stimulating emotions in the proselytizing process. In his sermons, Wesley would convince the audience that on the off chance they met their end suddenly, without accepting the Lord into their life, they would burn in hell for eternity. Wesley's personality was so charismatic and his sermons so convincing that he was able to stimulate in his audience an intense feeling of fear and anxiety. Overloaded with emotional stress caused by envisioning eternal hellfire, many in Wesley's audience would literally collapse in a state of emotional exhaustion. As Wesley wrote in his journal, "While I was speaking, one before me dropped down as dead, and presently a second and a third. 5 others sunk down in half an hour, most of whom were in violent agonies. The pains as of hell came about them, the snares of death overtook them." After breaking down for emotional exhaustion, those in Wesley's audience became highly suggestible. Wesley took advantage of this state by offering his potential converts the possibility of saving their soul by walking the path to salvation. As he wrote, "In their trouble we called upon the Lord, and he gave us an answer of peace. One indeed continued an hour in strong pain, and 1 or 2 more for 3 days. But the rest were greatly comforted in that hour, and went away rejoicing and praising God." Through this technique of emotionally debilitating individuals with fear and then offering them salvation, Wesley was able to obtain innumerable converts. While the inducement of emotional collapse can be used by political and religious leaders for the purpose of brainwashing individuals or attaining converts, emotional breakdowns also have potential therapeutic value. As a psychiatrist, Sargent championed the technique of purposely stimulating feelings of anger and anxiety in neurotic patients until an emotional collapse erased from their nervous system the neurotic thoughts and behaviors which had previously plagued them. However, while such a technique can be used for therapeutic purposes, Sargent recognized that in the wrong hands such a technique is used to control, manipulate, and exploit individuals. And in the hands of those who lead society,
ideas of religious, spiritual healing, ideas of nutrition, All of these different ideas have to be brainwashed out of the doctor. These all have to be relinquished. He has to give these up. He has to be able to embrace the synthetics. This takes a bit of brainwashing to accomplish.
When did the term doctor get treated with such reverence as, oh, right this way, Dr. Smith, or, excuse me, Dr. Scholes, what wonderful foot pads, or, pardon me, Dr. Patterson, but your flatulence has no odor. At what point in history did a doctor become more?
We have to learn to stop the brainwashing about this arrogance. We have to go back to being humble and appreciate the magic.
What's wrong with death, sir? What are we so mortally afraid of? Why can't we treat death with a certain amount of humanity and dignity and decency and, God forbid, maybe even humor? Death is not the enemy, gentlemen. If we're going to fight a disease, let's fight one of the most terrible diseases of all, indifference.
Death is truly not the enemy. It's part of a transition. As all things change, go on, different forms.
Now, I've sat in your schools and heard people lecture on transference and professional distance. Transference is inevitable, sir. Every human being has an impact on another. Why don't we want that in a patient-doctor relationship? That's why I've listened to your teachings, and I believe they're wrong.
Medicine starts with compassion, and it's the basis of all medicine. We need to stop this brainwashing and get back to compassion.
A doctor's mission should be not just to prevent death, but also to improve the quality of life. That's why you treat a disease, you win, you lose. You treat a person, I guarantee you'll win.
We have to look beyond the disease and beyond the diagnosis into how to make the person's life better.
Now here today, this room is full of medical students. Don't let them anesthetize you. Don't let them numb you out to the miracle of life. Always live in awe of the glorious mechanism of the human body. Let that be the focus of your studies and not a quest for grades, which will give you no idea what kind of doctor you will become.
There are 10 to the 27th electrons in every human body. So we are vastly, vastly complex and fractal and beyond complete understanding.
Please turn and
don't wait till you're on the ward to get your humanity back. Start your interviewing skills now. Start talking to strangers. Talk to your friends. Talk to wrong numbers. Talk to everyone.
Mr. Adams.
And cultivate friendships with those amazing people standing in the back of the room. Nurses that can teach you.
Don't lose your humanity, so you have to get it back. Hold on to it. Hold on to it fast and hard. And resist and stop the brainwashing.
Well, I'm happy to see you finally decided to conform.
More than you know, sir.
We have to help patients. We have to help doctors, because doctors are patients and patients are doctors. We have to learn to stop the brainwashing.